As you work with your Excel spreadsheet, have you ever run into an issue where you kind of like to do formatting on your own? You find it kind of a challenge. Maybe it's even kind of relaxing for you, and Excel gives you all sorts of opportunities and ways to format a spreadsheet and make it more readable for the people who need to read it and understand it. But you find that maybe with very little notice, you are given a deadline and you must format that spreadsheet. Well, what you can do is format your spreadsheet as a table. Now, it gives you some other really interesting possibilities when you do that. So we're going to look at that today. Hi, I'm Terry, one of the Consumer Technology Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library. And let's look at format as table. For our example today, we have the at least beginnings of somebody's trying to record what they have paid for bills and whatnot. And so it has a list of bills that they might pay on a monthly basis, or at least what they're anticipating paying for the first part of the year. And notice that there's just no special formatting to this at all, but now they've been challenged with adding some formatting because maybe they need to show it to someone, maybe they want to use it as an example for someone else, but for whatever reason, they want to pretty this up and they want to do it fairly fast. Well, what they can do is select the table. In A1, I have a title, and I don't really need to include the title of the spreadsheet in the spreadsheet itself. So I want to start at A2, and I definitely want to include the headings, and then I'll just come down to M14 as the last cell. So I've selected the table, the list, the spreadsheet, whatever we want to call it, but I haven't included any extra cells in this process. And then when I go to the Home tab in the ribbon and I go to the right of middle, I get to the Styles group, and the middle button in that Styles group is Format as Table. So I can click on that drop down and I get a gallery of choices. Now, isn't that just amazing? Because think, if I'm in a hurry but I still want it to look good, then I could choose any of these options that I see here. Now, as we come down to say light, and I hover my mouse, this is interesting because it says white, which to me kind of looks gray, and then it says light blue and light orange, and again white. But this is different when I look at it from this on the left. So I think really, even though this says white, it has variations of black, whereas this in the middle has variations of gray. And then as I go to the right, it has yellow, and then another kind of light blue, and they are a different shade of blue. And then to the right of that, we have green. Going down, as we look at light to medium to dark, you can see that as we go down, there is just more gray and black applied as we go from light to dark. And the hue or the saturation of the color changes in, say, blue here. As I go from blue, notice that I've started picking up gray here, and now I have a black heading with dark blue. So it's that kind of change as you go through and look at these different colors. Also, as you look for the particular choice that you want to make, as I look at this first row here in the light, for example, it shows that I have different backgrounds. So I go from light blue to white to light blue to white. Banded rows is what those are called. And then when I come down to the second choice, notice that I've also picked up border lines for the different rows, not for the columns, but just for the rows. And then as I come to the third choice, I have border lines for the rows and the columns. Now, it's the same kind of idea as I come down to medium, where now I have banded rows, but notice that the headings have some sort of color attached to them. And with those lines actually now on the rows as well, with the middle section here with medium, instead of having white, I have a lighter color. And as we come down, we also have, even though this is supposed to be blue, it's just a blue heading, but it's gray and white banded rows. And then I have a combination of blue and gray. So as I look across, though, these are sort of the theme as I look in a particular row in this gallery. And then, of course, coming down to the dark, each of those has a black heading, and then it's just varying saturations of color that band the different rows. So you can look at what you like and what you need and how this is going to look. With the dark, if you had a really large spreadsheet, you might consider how much ink this is going to take if you're going to print it out as well. But we'll start just with, say, light, and maybe this middle one here, and I guess I'll go with blue, and click on it. And it says, all right, now let's verify where the table is. So where is the data? And it starts at A2, which is correct, and it ends at M14, which is correct. And the whole thing has what they used to call marching ants, and now I think it's called a marquee, going around that whole table area. And it even gives me a choice of, does my table have headers or not? The table has headers because it has the months of the year, the column headings in row 2. So yes, definitely I want to be sure to include that if that's true. And then we'll click OK. And now as I click off, I can see, well, it's given me a column heading where I didn't want one, but then it also has the different column headings as well. Now, here are some interesting things to look at as we look at this formatting as a table. First of all, notice that I have drop-down arrows. So let's click on the drop-down here to see what it's showing. Well, it's exactly like sort and filter, isn't it? So I could sort the contents within this table from smallest to largest or largest to smallest. I can sort by color, and that would be a custom sort because there's really no color in the cells. In the sheet view, this is just the default. I could look at the different kinds of filters that I want to create. So beyond checking the filters that I want to use down below, I could sort of create custom filters for I'm looking for the cells that equal a certain number or don't equal a certain number, or there's a range of numbers, or I could even choose top 10, above average, below average, and even then go to custom filter. So I have a whole lot of filtering and sorting choices within this table just because I made it a table. When I click on this table, just anywhere in it, I can look at my ribbon, and on the far right of the tabs, I now have a contextual tab that is called Table Design. When I click on Table Design, I get even more options to work with this table because I formatted as a table. Starting at the left, one of the things that I can do is give this a table name. So I could even call it something like bills and press enter, because I might have several tables within the same workbook, and this would help me identify a table if I'm looking for specific objects. Now, to the right of that, we have some choices here that also appear on the ribbon, just not maybe specifically for table design. So I can remove duplicates. And with large pieces of information, especially names and addresses, it seems like you always have duplicate names or duplicate addresses, and this would help you to do that. We're going to come back to this Convert to Arrange button. So we're going to spend most of our time here with the table style options, because right now it tells us that we do have a header row that is different from the rest of the table. Let's, in fact, uncheck that for a second. And it didn't even just make it different, it turned it off totally and made it invisible. Let's make that again, because I think that is pretty important to have that header row. Now it also says that we have banded rows, although with the pattern, the style that we chose, we don't really have banded rows. So let's come over to the right to Table Styles. And while I can, as I look at these arrows, click in the middle one here and go down a row at a time, I can also come down to the More button, which is the third one here, click on it, and it gives me that entire gallery again. So I still might decide to go with this light blue just in row 3 of the light group as opposed to the second row. So we can click on that, and we have banded rows. Now those are a lot more obvious. If I click on that check mark for banded rows, it turns them off. But I kind of like them. Let's turn them back on. Now, we also have some other options here, which is kind of intriguing. First column, let's see what that does. Let's click on first column, and it makes the first column bold text. Now, depending on the style that we have, it might even make it like these styles down here. When you look at table styles, it might also give it a different background. But we'll just stay with our regular table format that we've chosen and simply say, well, I kind of like the bold on the first column, and really that's what happened with the headers as well. They weren't originally bold, they were just made that way by selecting a table style. Now, last column, sometimes that's important because you have some sort of formula in the last column that would also need to stand out. So let's click on last column. I don't have anything there, so it's hard to say. And then it says we could even have banded columns. Let's see what that looks like. And sure enough, every other column now has a light blue background as well. I may turn that one off. One of the things that we noted at the very beginning was that we had filter buttons, and you may decide that that is something that you're really not overly excited about. You may not even need to use it. So in the table style options on the right, it has filter button, and we can turn the filter button off. We can always turn it back on, but for at least right now, we don't have the ability to filter or sort, at least within the Table Design tab. Before we go any further, I would like to click where it says Column 1 and change that to something that makes better sense. So I'm just going to give this a heading of Bills. And notice that, of course, I'm not typing in bold or anything, but when I press Enter, it becomes just part of the column headings. Because what we might want to do is between ABC credit card and bills. So I could do a right click and insert, and look at that, banded rows. And the interesting thing is I don't have to worry about, well, manually I would be taking out light blue and putting in just plain white and then going to the next one and putting in the light blue, and that would take forever potentially unless I knew how to write a macro that would fix it for me. Well, let's say that I want to add something in the center here. Well, I could insert here. And again, the banded rows just adjust, so I could type, I don't know, new bill. Well, let's see if I can also add something at the bottom, which with older versions of Excel, you always had to make manual adjustments when you added to the bottom of, say, a spreadsheet or a list. So let's type something here. Let's make it DEF. I guess I can make it capitals. DEF credit card. So I've added something at the bottom. I press enter and it gets the blue banding as well. Now it's also bold because I'm in column A and Excel recognizes that as a row heading. That is just really fascinating, isn't it? Well, now if I can add new rows, can I also add new columns? And I'm going to assume it's pretty easy to add one here. So let me do a right click and insert. And that was easy enough, and it's picked up the bold heading. And actually I have June and now June 2. But let's say that in O, I want to be able to make that a total because I want to know the total for the year. So I'm going to type total and press enter. And the banding has carried clear across and total is bolded and I am ready to go on. It doesn't really make sense to have this empty row 3, so I'm going to do a right click and delete it very quickly. But now let's go to O3 where we have our potential total. And I would like to just add in a formula. To do that, I think I'm just going to go to AutoSum and click, because AutoSum will look above or to the left of where I'm trying to write my formula, and it looks to the left and it says, oh, you've got numbers to the left, and you can even see that with the little marching ants or marquee or whatever you want to call it. But here is where we're going to see some real differences, because as I come up to the formula bar, which may be the easiest way to see this, the equal sum is something that you might be expecting. So it's looking at bills at January through December. So January is now a range name that refers to B3 through B16. Now, range names are something we haven't discussed, but they are basically English equivalents of cell references. So now I can simply say I want to add January, and Excel knows what those cells are. I want to add May, which would be F3 through F16, for example, and Excel knows that. So it is saying we're going to take the sum of the bills at January through December and give us a total. Here is where the real magic happens. Watch what happens when I press enter. And I have a total for ABC credit card, which is not so unusual, but it also filled in the rest of the entire column. That is just pure magic, isn't it? The one thing that we want to look at then is if I can add a total column, can I add a total row? Well, it's even easier than you might suspect. Let me click in our formatted table so that we can go to the Table Design tab at the far right. And we're going to go to the Table Style Options group where we left out one of the check boxes, and that was Total Row. When I check Total Row, we now have row 17 that lets us have totals. And if I click in O17, this is where it gets a little crazy. So follow with me. First of all, in O17, it has added all of these totals. So we now have a yearly total right there. But look how it was created. When we go to the formula bar, it is using the subtotal function. For the most part, that probably doesn't affect anything unless you want to use the subtotal function another way. There's sort of a conflict between that function, that manual function, and how it is used with a formatted table. So that is something that you might want to be aware of. I can't think of another function where you have a conflict with a formatted table. Who knows, you might run into one, but certainly I know there's a conflict with subtotal function and then trying to get a total in the total row when you have a formatted table. let's go on to B17 where I want to get a total for the month. And when I click in B17, we get something odd because usually when you have a total row, you don't get a drop-down arrow, do you? Let's click on the drop-down. And here are the same choices that you get for the AutoSum button. They're just some of the more popular kinds of functions that you might want to use. So we could say, oh, I want to use an average or a count or count numbers. The largest number, find it, or the smallest number, find it. And here's sum, which is what we'll use. I could even try standard deviation or variation or even more functions. What I'm going to highly recommend is that you don't do sum in one column and average in another column and standard deviation in another, but whatever you choose, keep it consistent. Well, let's go with sum. And you'll notice that it did not copy across the entire row. So now I'm left with, do I click in the next column and click the drop down and select sum, which that works, or do I just go to the fill handle and click and drag across and copy that formula? And that works as well. So whatever works best for you is what you would definitely want to do. At some point, you may find that using the table as a formatted table is not what you want to do, and yet you want to keep the formatting. You just don't want to define this as a table anymore, or a formatted table, and there could be several reasons for that. Well, what you can do if you want to remove this format as table information but keep the formatting is you can select this entire table, go to Table Design just above the ribbon, and what we're going to do is come back over to the left to the Tools group where we can convert to range and click on it. And it says, now, do you want to make it a normal range? It's no longer going to act like a formatted table that we used the format as table button to create, and we'll say yes. And let's see what happens. So really, it didn't change a whole lot, did it? But now when I click in, say, this totals row, I no longer get the drop-down arrow. When I click anywhere here, I no longer get the contextual tab that lets me do some of the formatting that I was able to do previously. But I should be able to do some of the things that I wasn't able to do with this table when it was formatted as a table. So occasionally you may want to reverse what you've done, and now you know how. To learn even more, be sure to go to mymcpl.org/online learning, where you'll find such great resources as Universal Class, LinkedIn Learning, and Learning Express Library. Be sure to also find us on Facebook and YouTube. On Facebook, you can find us at MCPL 360, and on YouTube you can find us on our MCPL MO channel, and be sure to look for our MCPL Consumer Technology Resources playlist. We will premiere new videos every Wednesday and Friday at 1 o'clock. So if you miss one of our premieres, don't worry, you can come back and find them when it's convenient to you.